Welcome back to Polarify Consulting. Today, we're not just talking about economics. We're pulling back the curtain on how America's growing budget deficits could be driving a hidden geopolitical agenda. What if the U.S. isn't just struggling with debt, but actively repositioning itself for a new era? One where territorial expansion, resource dominance, and even the dismantling of NATO could be part of the strategy. Is it geopolitics shaped by hard economic realities? Let's dive in. First, the numbers. The United States has been running budget deficits for decades. A budget deficit simply means the government is spending more than it earns. This isn't inherently bad. Deficits can stimulate growth during recessions, but when they become permanent, the economy starts to buckle. Since the 1970s, deficits have been the norm, not the exception. And the U.S. national debt, which was $5.7 trillion in 2000, has surpassed $34 trillion as of 2024, with interest payments alone exceeding national defense spending. This could partly explain recent moves by the U.S. to pull itself out from certain multilateral agencies and limit overseas U.S. aid. Imagine paying so much interest on your credit card that you can't afford groceries. That's where the U.S. is heading. And the ripple effects? With rising interest rates, the government competes with businesses for capital, driving up borrowing costs. A weakening dollar in the medium to long term will erode global confidence, risking its status as the world's reserve currency. When crises like pandemics, wars, or natural disasters hit, the government's hands will be tied financially. Let's talk about the real-world impact. High debt burdens slow down economic expansion, making it harder to invest in infrastructure, education, or innovation. Rising costs of living, declining public services, and growing inequality fuel political polarization. The U.S. increasingly relies on foreign creditors, including strategic rivals like China, to finance its debt. This isn't just an accounting problem, it's an existential crisis for the U.S. economic model. So how does a superpower escape this financial quicksand? Traditional solutions like raising taxes, cutting spending, or inflating away the debt are politically toxic and economically risky. But what if there was another option? One that doesn't rely on belt-tightening or fragile alliances. One that taps directly into untapped wealth, vast resources, and strategic dominance. This brings us to the pivot point, geopolitics. Here's where it gets interesting. What if America's fiscal crisis is fueling a quiet strategic ambition to expand? Enter Canada and Greenland. Canada, rich in oil, gas, fresh water, timber, and critical minerals. Everything from lithium to cobalt essential for the tech economy. Greenland, a treasure trove of rare earth elements and a strategic Arctic gateway as melting ice opens new shipping routes. For an economy starved of fiscal breathing room, absorbing or at least exerting control over, these resource giants could be a game changer. Think of it like this. Instead of balancing the budget with painful cuts or tax hikes, the U.S. could expand its way out of the crisis. Resource extraction would flood the U.S. economy with wealth, reducing deficits without unpopular domestic reforms. Control over critical minerals would decrease reliance on China, strengthening national security. As climate change reshapes the Arctic, controlling Greenland would give the U.S. unmatched leverage over emerging trade routes. This isn't just economic theory, it's a strategic blueprint. But there's a problem. NATO. For over 70 years, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has been the bedrock of Western security, designed to maintain stability across Europe and North America. Canada and Denmark were among the founding members of NATO. But as the world evolves, the question arises, does NATO still serve America's best interests, or has it become a constraint? And then, there are other geopolitical fronts. Consider Taiwan, a flashpoint with China. Defending Taiwan isn't defending U.S. soil, it's defending a third country. War games predict high costs, with the looming specter of potential defeat. From U.S. perspective, why really risk it on Taiwan? Strategically, could the U.S. allow China access to Taiwan's rare earth minerals, focusing instead on securing supplies from Canada and Greenland. This reduces the risk of military entanglement while safeguarding critical resources essential for American industry and defense. But what about Europe? Without NATO, Europe faces a new reality. The Russian threat looms large. Without NATO, Russia could push aggressively into Eastern Europe. But paradoxically, this might catalyze a stronger, more self-reliant European defense posture, no longer dependent on American power. But this strategy isn't without risks. Moves perceived as imperialistic could fracture alliances, isolate the U.S. diplomatically, and trigger economic retaliation from both adversaries and former allies. With the American power in decline, there is a power vacuum at the helm. Antarctic is pivotal to fill this vacuum. The Arctic could well be the 21st century's great game of geopolitical maneuvering. It is in this context that the control over Canada and Greenland becomes imperative. There is still a window of opportunity for Canada, Europe, and other world powers to maneuver this evolving geopolitical landscape. For instance, if Canada pivots towards strategic alliances beyond US for its trade and security, rapidly develops and exploits its natural resource potential, engages in rapid development of its defense capabilities, and makes strategic moves to develop and inhabit its far north, things could start to look a little different. But the timeline to foresee any meaningful result here provides more than enough runway for the US to make its maneuvers too. The strategic moves thus need to be astute. To sum it up, America's growing budget deficits aren't just an economic crisis. They may be the fuel for a new geopolitical strategy, one that reshapes borders, alliances, and even the balance of power in the 21st century. Is the US quietly preparing for its next frontier? And if so, what will that mean for the world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into business, technology, and geopolitics. This is Polarify Consulting. See you in the next video.